So part 8, the conversation came up about if they knew somebody to fly. So I'll give you a bit of a lay of the land about Vancouver. Vancouver had at the time 25,000 hydroponic houses. There's certain things I can't say because we're on an app and social media. 25,000 people were growing tomatoes in their basement in Vancouver. It was very common at the time, and it was all exported, a lot of it down into the US, and these guys were doing a lot of it. Not that I knew anything about it at the time. So when this conversation came up, could have been 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It'd be great if somebody knew a pilot. I had wanted to be a pilot since I can remember. I think the first time I ever wanted to be a pilot, unfortunately, the town that I grew up in would be classed as one of the deadliest mining towns in Australia. I believe we've had 4 underground mine explosions, which has killed close to 40 people. It's a little town called Mara in central Queensland in the Bowen Basin. And I think it was the 1986 disaster, and it blew up and it killed, I believe, 13. And anyway, all the news people came into town in helicopters, and I just remember sitting on my bike looking at these helicopters, amazing machines, and I was always fascinated from that point on. I tried to join the Air Force, but my grades weren't good enough, and yeah, I always had a fascination for aviation. When this came up, I operated heavy equipment, so I was always had good coordination with my hands and feet, and I believe that I could do it. And that's how I look at life itself. Is I believe anything you put your mind to, you can actually do, and I live that to the absolute extreme. So that came out. I wonder if anyone knows a pilot, and I said I took some ultralight lessons years ago, but I seen the wings come off in ultralights, and a couple of guys got killed. So I definitely didn't want to get an ultralight again. And I said to these guys, I think I could do it. So Chris gave me some money. I think he gave me $500 or something, and said, hey, why don't you go take one of those introductory flights and see whether you could do it. So, I took the money. We had a bunch more drinks, bunch more everything, and the next morning when I woke up, or the next afternoon, I looked and thought, hey, I'll go get that flight and see if I could actually do it. So I called up flying school and went out the next day, and I took I believe a 30-minute introductory flight in a Bell 47J. So this is, for people that don't know aviation, this is a helicopter, a MASH helicopter, that old TV show with the big bubble, with the open tail at the back. These helicopters predominantly were made in the 40s and 50s, so they were 50 years old. And they actually had wooden blades, believe it or not. And so I went out and got an introductory flight in this helicopter. So they're very slow, but everything's very manual. So I remember Andy was the name of the instructor. He took me out, and we flew around. And in an introductory flight, even though it's 30 minutes, they actually give you the controls. So, we're flying along, and he said, grab the stick and go left, go right. And then he showed me what a helicopter could actually do. And we went in between some trees, and we went around this little swamp and started balancing the helicopter on these different stumps. And then he showed the helicopter just can't go straight up, that it's got to spiral out of here to gain. And in that half an hour, I think I paid for an extra half an hour. He said, oh, you're really good at it. So then I put my feet on the pedals, and then I started working all together. And by the time we got back, I felt I just felt comfortable. I could feel the machine, and that's, I guess, having all those years in a machine. And upon landing and having a talk to Andy, or the flying instructor at the time, he said, "You're a natural. You're really good at this." So I jumped in my car and went back into Vancouver. And that night I went into work, and after work was all over, these guys, the gangsters that owned the club, along with Chris, were sitting around, and I said, "Hey guys, I took that flight today." And they said, "Well, how'd you go?" And confidence and cockiness took over, and said, "Yeah, it's a piece of cake." The instructor said I was a natural, and they said, "Well, how quick do you think you can pick it up?" I said, "We're good to go." So that in itself started the ball rolling. So they said, "What sort of helicopter do you think you would need?" And I like I said, I've seen the Jet Ranger 206 in my town when Channel 7 flew in. I also took a flight at SeaWorld once, and they put me in the front seat, and I always knew a 206 Jet Ranger. Always had it in my head. And I said, "We need a back seat, and obviously the more cargo we can hold, the better we'd be." And I said, "A 206 Jet Ranger." And with that, they said, "No problem, start looking around." And from this point on, everything starts moving really, really quickly. I'm still working basically 3 or 4 jobs. I'm living in the city, I'm still doing construction full time, I'm basically bartending full time, and I'd bought a whole apartment complex, and I was fixing that up, and that was about a 2-hour drive from Vancouver. It was a 4-plex. I think we'd sold the house in Seattle at the time. And then on top of that, I had to try and get some lessons. So in saying that, I didn't get a lot of lessons. I think I would have been under 10 hours, and I was trying to fly as much as we could. And at the time it was coming into winter, so weather was really, permitting, whether you could fly that day, and I had all these other things going on. So I must be, tops 10 hours trying, and I had no time to go to school or do any of the night study.